I think and I think probably that's the answer is I enjoy teaching, but what I love getting out of it is just standing back, after you've had an opportunity to work with a guest and to say, "Hey, what if you thought of that particular thing this way?"
Hmm.
Let me give you I can give you an example. Um, we were in an old hotel. I had a number of guests and I was trying to teach them kind of what can happen, how they can be outside influenced and not even know it. So I would pick a long hallway in this old hotel and I'd say, "Could I have a volunteer of someone who wants to go down that dark hallway?" And somebody would inevitably volunteer and I would say, "Okay, well, just so you know what to expect." I said, "A lot of my guests have gone down the hallway and they experience feeling a little off balance, a little dizzy,
Hmm.
or like somebody's watching them," which was true. And I would send them down, they'd come back, and I'd say, "What happened?" And they would tell what happened. Oftentimes, it was very similar, and we would talk about it, and I would say, "Did you catch that I set you up for exactly what to experience?"
Hmm.
And it's just that moment, and this is true of anything that we do, in that moment, you could see the light bulb go on. And you
Yeah.
know that you had reached them or you had reached kind of this critical point of changing their way of understanding things. And I think on whatever level that exists, it's really important and it's really what drives me.
And that's something we're going to talk about a little bit more, teaching and helping to expand the field. But we're about ready to
Yeah.
take our first break. So, folks, stay with us. I'm with Sherri Cox, owner of Doodlebug Dowsing and a member of the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. We'll be back right after these messages. And we are back with my guest tonight, Sherri Cox. And Sherri, towards the end of that last segment, we began talking about teaching. Um, and we also talked a little bit about the influence the media has had. So we'll start off with that. What do you think the media has done with the interest and where the paranormal field is now to include how has that affected tours such as you were involved with at American Ghost Adventures? Kind of a long question, but
It's okay. I think just because, being with American Ghost Adventures and then joining you in 2011, so much has happened during that time. I mean, when I first got interested in all of this, there was very little to
Mhm.
watch and to take in. I mean, I think we were still watching the UK's Most Haunted. Not is it Most Haunted? Yeah, with Yvette's
Yeah,
and all of that, where they were
yeah,
like, through
Pierre LaCour,
something,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that was wonderful. And I just remembered enjoying that so much, but they were kind of the only game out there until Ghost Hunter started.
Mhm.
And I think it's changed so much. And I think it's interesting because kind of what I see sometimes and continue to see is it makes a lot of armchair paranormal investigators.
Okay.
So I think in some way the media has been really terrific in helping mainstream this and helping people develop an understanding of what it is that we do and what's out there and what's possible. So I think that's interesting because it's helping create a new generation or a new group of people that have this interest and are willing to kind of expand their minds a little bit. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I think we have to be super careful because not everyone's doing it for the right reasons and in the right way. And
Mhm.
sometimes because that's a little more exciting to watch, that's what sticks.
Well,
And
what
so
do you
I
mean
think
by go
go
ahead,
ahead.
finish,
Oh,
no,
I was going to
what do you
say,
mean
so
by
that's what sticks, but
yeah. What do you mean by doing it the right way? That's an interesting concept because there's nothing out there that says this is the proper way, this is the improper way. So what do
yeah,
you mean by the right way?
I think what I mean, and I'm not saying, that there's a right and a wrong way to investigate. That's certainly very personal and open for interpretation. But I think um, there's a lot of content out there that how do I put this in the right way? There's a lot of content out there that is for it presents itself as being for show. And
Mhm.
it's not about, trying to be scientific. It's not about trying to be ethical. It's not trying to go about investigations for the purposes of research and understanding. It's for entertainment purposes. So I guess you can't say that it's the right or the wrong way. It's just not what I believe is the correct way. So I think you have a lot of people who will watch something on TV or online on YouTube, and then decide to go into their own venue and conjure something up, and they'll yell and scream and demand things because that's what's being modeled to them. And I just think we
Mhm.
have to be really careful and just take responsibility that we're going about it in an ethical way, I guess you could say, rather than right and wrong.
And I would agree with you. Certainly, the TV shows have gotten, like you said, a lot more people interested, but it does allow folks to go out there and let's face it. And there's a term I used: paranormal thrill seekers. They want to go
Yeah.
out to just basically hear the bump in the night, maybe the EVP on the recorder,
And
but
that's
they
okay.
don't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's room for everyone, but there's also got to be the actual research. But also, does it open the door to folks that want to are only doing it for their 15 minutes of fame, or maybe even a more nefarious reason to perhaps con somebody
Oh, I
for.
think you could say that about any industry. Absolutely. There's
Mhm,
always going to be those people that want to take advantage. I think it's
mhm,
absolutely out there. And I think too, a lot what I like to see is, especially a lot of the shows that are on TV right now, really do take responsibility. I think they understand that they have a lot of followers, they have people that look up to them, that will be modeling them, and they do take the time to communicate, and they'll say, hey, what you're seeing here, we want to make sure that you understand that you don't just walk into a
mhm.
venue without permission, and that you
Yeah.
have to work very hard to do the right thing when you're out there trying to do it. And I think the groups that do that are super successful. And I think there's a responsibility for all of us, no matter how we're going
Mhm.
about it, that we are realizing that there are people that don't understand or are new or whatever it is that are watching, and they're going to do what we're doing. And so I think
Yes. Now,
it's like anything else, with great power comes great responsibility. I think you kind of look at that in the same way. So
in a lot of other fields, and you're right, wherever there's people involved, you're going to have people doing the wrong thing or doing something for
absolutely.
their own benefit.
Yep.
But those other fields also have checks and balances. There's some sort of
Mhm.
framework, there's some sort of structure that if somebody's doing something wrong, they can be called to task, whether it be legally or civilly. We don't have that in this field, though, do we?
No, and I know that's something that you've talked to me about ever since I've known you. And so
Mhm,
it's been a really important thing for you to try to help create that framework and to get other groups or other, whoever is interested on board with helping to decide what that framework is. And wouldn't it be nice? And how far could we go with this concept if we had that? And it doesn't
what
mean that we all have to investigate in the same way, but
that's
it's
exactly
about
right.
taking what we get and preserving it in the same way and communicating with each other. And I think it could be so powerful.
Well, it could be powerful because working together, not necessarily as one entity, but everybody moving forward with the same goal and working
Mhm.
under the same structure. Basically, and you're right. Everybody investigates different. That has nothing to do with it. But some sort of structure. I think we might have an opportunity to actually move forward. Maybe
Yeah,
begin to find the answers, and that's okay for folks that want to just go out on the weekends and get a good skit. That's fine. But
absolutely.
there's gotta be some of us that want to move the field forward.
Well, and I think the people are out there because I hear people talk about it. I've heard people talk about it on your shows. I've heard, there have been
Mhm,
people that have come to join our team, with investigations or events and that type of thing. And they're all very, very interested. It's just making it finally happen, and how to organize it, how to preserve it, that type of thing is not
mhm,
easy. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of communication. But I think it's
mhm.
possible.
Well, anything's possible, and I really get frustrated with people saying, "You'll," and I get this all the time, it's never gonna happen, Larry. You're never gonna be able to do it." Well, I am not gonna say never.
Good
I'm
for
just
you.
not. May not be the brightest star in the sky, but by God, I am a
You're
tenacious
persistent.
one. I'm persistent, no doubt about that. Uh, do you think that a lot of the tours, what we do at Indian River Hauntings, what you did at American Ghost Tours, um, is that a good place to start with this maybe? Because I know we've actually have members that on our team that came from those types of events that joined us, and they later became very important members of the team, the FBPI.
Yeah.
So do you see that as a place where we can grow maybe investigators or people with an interest that share the same philosophies?
Oh, absolutely. What I think it's nice, what our team does that I think can really help when you do the Paranormal 101 classes. Had an opportunity to be wrapped into one this year with you and
Mhm.
to do a little section of presentation. And just watching the people and listening to their questions and that type of thing. And these are the people that are really wanting to go about it in a kind of a systemized way to soak in and learn everything that they can. They show up an appreciation of kind of how Indian River Hauntings and Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation do things. And
Mhm.
then we either grow our team that way or they perhaps branch out to form their own teams. And that's how I think you're creating that foundation.
I call that the pebble in the pond theory, where you
Yeah.
toss that little pebble out and
Yep.
those ripples will hit folks and maybe eventually it'll bring everybody together, thinking at least thinking the same way. We'll never ever
Yeah.
be the same way.
But,
Hey,
some of the groups that are doing the tours and that type of thing, they're there just for that reason.
mm,
I don't know that that they're interested in taking it any further. And I think that's okay. I think you're
mhm,
going to always have those people who kind of are comfortable doing what they're doing. They're doing it for that purpose, whether it's historic knowledge or that type of thing. And I don't know that that's going to grow anymore, but it might
mhm.
be interesting to try.
Here's a philosophical question. You're using a place in a venue for an event. You really don't believe, you're just doing it because you know people will come and pay the price of the ticket just for the possibility of a good scare. Does the other side see that, and do they react to it, in your opinion? This is
Gosh,
just
that's a really interesting question. I would think if you're looking at it that way, if you're looking at it believing that there's another side, the thing is, as you said, you don't believe and you're doing the event, but does the other side see it?
Mhm,
It's like, I don't know. Um, I think part of me feels like the belief of what you're doing somehow is what create because you asked me to talk about something in particular tonight too, and I think belief is a lot.
mhm.
But I do believe that, yeah, if there is something there, if there's something to this, whether it's another dimension or a parallel universe, or there's unfinished business and a spirit, lingering behind, or we're creating our own experience or whatever it is. I think that there's something there. And I think that it can be intelligent. And sure, I think that could absolutely affect the outcome.
Along, sort of along
Does
those
that make
lines.
sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it does. It does,
Yeah.
and I think those are the questions that we're still trying to find in this field, and I think
Yeah.
we sometimes lose sight of that. We really don't know. We
Oh,
don't
we
know
have
what's
no idea.
causing all this,
Oh,
and the folks that say they know, or they have an absolute handle on what's going on the other side, I just feel they're either fooling themselves and the people they're talking to, and maybe a little bit of both, because we don't know, and that's why
yeah.
a little healthy dose of skepticism is is very, very important.
And I think
Um,
humility goes a long way too.
yeah, that's something that's lacking sometimes, isn't the humility in
Sometimes,
it?
yeah, yeah,
And I've seen it at events where people are chastised. They'll bring in evidence and they'll present it to somebody that they would consider to be an expert, and they're chastised for it
yeah.
because that's not, instead of talking about it, discussing it and finding out
Mhm.
where that person's how that person saw it and how they perceived it. It's just
I mean, we have
we
that happen frequently. We'll have somebody come to an event, and usually it appears in the form of a picture or a video on someone's phone,
Mhm,
and they're
mhm,
very excited about whatever it is that they captured, and they are insistent upon what it is. They have it
yeah,
figured out, and then they ask you what you think. And I think it's so important in that moment because that's when the teaching starts.
yes.
And this person is excited. There's potential there for someone to be, kind of a lifelong lover of this type of thing. And what you do and how you respond in that moment is everything. And I think it's all about meeting people where they are at
Coaching
that
and everything.
moment.
We're gonna talk a little bit about that when we get back
Right.
after this break. So folks, stay with us. I have Sherri Cox from Doodlebug Dowsing and the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation with us. Be right back after these messages. And welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, Sherri Cox. Sherri, it's Really been a pleasure chatting with you here, and I think you brought up some very, very important things that don't get discussed enough in the field, and that's teaching, and that's helping people understand. Because I don't know how you feel about it, but teaching opens up one's mind, and opening up one's mind, I think, allows us to see things a whole lot clearer
Well put.
instead instead of being stuck in our own little mud here. Let's talk about the mind for just a second and how that affects everything. You're familiar with the Philip experiment. We've talked about it before.
Yes.
And the for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's a group that not unlike ours that did an experiment back in Toronto in the 70s, and they basically created an individual named Philip, did a closed investigation, documented via film with witnesses, and they got all kinds of hits and words and things claiming to be Philip, table tipping. But Philip was their own imagination. They created. So what did that tell us? And what does that teach us about perhaps our own mind, or is the capability of our minds? Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's interesting. I think, and I got a chance to work in the metaphysical world for a few years, which was really interesting. And I got a chance to talk to people on a daily basis about energy and how important energy. And you keep hearing everything is energy. We know that energy can't be created or destroyed, only recycled. All of those things that are very
Mhm,
familiar to us. And you look at the Philip experiment, and there's a lot of different ways that you could look at that. You have, is it possible that they created the energy that produced Philip? Is it
mhm,
possible that there was an energy already there, or whatever it is that we're going to call it? There was something already there, like you said from before, that was aware of what was happening in that moment, and then
mhm,
decided that, oh, I'm going to step forth and mess with them as Philip. It could be a lot of different things. That
mhm.
second part, it seems a little complicated in nature. I don't know what it was, but I think there's a ton of possibilities. But I think the mind and your energy that you're bringing, especially into an investigation or to a situation, is so important. And I think we see that
Mhm.
because even lately, our team is starting to change up a little bit how we're approaching as we're starting off a private investigation of some sort. We're now starting with a meditation or a
Mhm.
focus or that type of thing. And I think we've seen that it does change the outcome of some things, whether it just makes us better investigators and more aware of what's going around us, or it's actually adding energy to the situation that's allowing more things to manifest.
As you know, I'm always questioning, when are we going to start creating new pieces of equipment in order to
Mhm.
enhance our investigations? Do we need to spend more time, in your opinion, examining the powers and the abilities of the mind in order to further the field?
I think it's crucial. I just think that a lot of times we have no idea of how to go about that. And I
Mhm,
think because it's intensely scientific in nature, and it requires a lot of learning. It requires a lot of experiments, figuring out how do we really understand totally how the mind works. um, I think you're just opening up another entire wing of investigation. But I think it's exciting. I think that might be able to break down some of the walls that we're experiencing, because I know we feel that we have this one bag of tricks in terms of investigation tools, and that
mhm.
gets frustrating sometimes. And there are people out there inventing new things. It seems more lately they're inventing new versions of the same things, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure how useful that is. I think it makes those tools easier to use, or that type of thing. So I think that's great, but they're not new things per se.
Mhm,
Give or take a couple of things that have come out recently. But we're trying to go back with our team and kind of pick up some of those old school things. Like one of our team members brought a plate filled with sand, and then we asked for that to be manipulated.
mhm,
So we're doing things like that. We were talking about using you remember the game, the children's game Simon, with the colored buttons on it that would
mhm.
make a pattern, and then you would respond and duplicate the pattern. We were thinking, would that work? That's a tactile thing that could work. So I think we're kind of trying to think out of the box, even though the tools are old.
And until we can figure out some new tools and some new ways to do things, we're gonna be stuck. We've got to move forward. I
Yeah.
wish I was smart enough to create some of those new tools, and
And I
maybe
wish
there's
that sometimes it takes this, a lot of those tools are created by people who, have a really good investment in engineering and science and technology and that type of thing. And I think sometimes those are the people that don't really get what we're doing.
so
And I think that can be hard.
how do we get them to get what we're doing?
I don't know. It's a possibility. Do we find somebody and get them on a team and have them experience it and talk to them about what we're trying to accomplish? Is it important? I would say, is it important for them to believe and be invested in what's going on? I don't think it's necessarily important for that to happen, but I think it's us going to them and saying, hey, this is what we're experiencing. This is what we'd like to measure. We'd like you to create something that measures that for us. And then I
Do
don't
you,
know if it's important that they believe.
okay.
I don't know.
Do you think we're any closer now, not just the on the engineering side, but even the scientific side? Are we any closer now than we were 20 years ago to begin to move what this field is out of the pseudoscience into the more science realm with the assistance of scientists, neurologists, engineers? Are we any closer?
I think my opinion would be I don't think so.
Mm,
The only thing I think that is that it is an advantage that this is a little more acceptable to talk about.
than it was
I
20
can
years ago.
have yeah, yeah, and I think it feels like that's all the farther that we've gotten. Now, certainly I'm not an expert in this field. I have my limited experiences with these two teams. I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of research, that type of thing. But
Mhm.
I've not come across anything that makes me think, wow, we're really advanced now, because it doesn't feel like that.
No, I don't think anybody really is
Mm-mm.
that far advanced yet. But we've got to figure out how to get there.
And I think
Uh,
maybe the only thing is now the skeptics maybe think that we're less crazy. I don't
okay,
know.
that's what
Maybe not.
yeah, yeah. So, kind of changing the subject just a little bit here. We've talked
Sure.
a lot about evidence and the mind. What does Sherry Cox think ghosts are? What is your philosophy as to what it is on the other side?
After having done this for what, 13, 14, 15 years now, and the different experiences that I've had, I think what my mind starts to do is start to believe that what we're experiencing has a lot more to do with our energy than anything else. I'm less likely to feel that there is a spirit of an old woman who has unfinished business, and so she's staying in this house and this is who we're communicating with, or
Okay.
that type of thing. And I feel like somehow it's us, and I can't explain that. Like, I can't say scientifically, well, it's because the human psyche and and human energy, or whatever it is that we're putting out there, how it creates it, I don't know. But
Mhm.
I just think, if I always say that if I find out someday that it was us all along, to me, that's almost more interesting than a woman with unfinished business.
So,
I think it's
which are
fascinating.
so you think the power of our own brain, our own energy is creating the evidence?
I think it's a possibility, and I think,
Mhm.
some of that comes into play when we talk about the different investigation venues. There's your holy grail venues. You've got, Eastern State and all of those places that we all want to go. And sometimes you hear people talk about things being over investigated. We
I was
even
going to
had
get
that
to that.
experience, in Fellsmere when we were, at the old schoolhouse, so frequently. And we, after a while, experienced a diminishing of activity. And we
Mhm.
wondered why. And I wonder if that's not part of it. It could be the people that we're bringing in. It could be that the different energies that come with the tours or with us on any given day is directly affecting our experiences. It's like, is something haunted because someone believes it is?
Okay.
I don't
So,
know.
okay. Do you believe there's an afterlife? Do we go somewhere? Does our essence, our consciousness darkness? Does it go
I
somewhere?
follow this amazing woman on Instagram. She is a psychic medium, and I have my own beliefs about that. I think that's a really, really difficult field. That's a whole other show. But
Mm,
she talks about information that she says that she gets from the other side.
okay.
And she talks about what happens to our souls or our energy or whatever it is when we die. And
Okay.
she can unequivocally speak to the fact that the souls will leave a body, this just being a vessel, and that will go to kind of a waiting room where there is healing administered at that time. And then she talks about the concept of soul families, and she deals a lot in reincarnation and that type of stuff, and I find her view of things fascinating.
Does this view include those folks that have passed on to this waiting room, if I hate
Yeah.
to use it that way,
Uh-huh.
coming back to visit us? Is that
Absolutely. She said
okay?
that is a
So
possibility, and that, that she has uncovered. They have told her that they do come back for various reasons. So I guess that does play into the whole idea of unfinished business now that you think about it.
mhm.
But I think it's
How
been
does she know
interesting
this?
to learn from her. She said that the way a lot of people talk about it, she says that she has spirit guides that are revealing these things to her. So I
Mhm.
don't know. I don't know her. I don't know her background, but I think her information is compelling, and I listen to her a lot, and I try to do research, and I try to learn more. And I think she makes some interesting cases. But I don't know that that necessarily ties into my belief that we're creating it, because that's two different things.
It is, but I think what you've just described, Sherry, is the fact that we really don't know.
We have no idea.
There's just so many different questions out there. So just to kind of throw another wrench at you, cryptids, UFOs. A lot of talk now that they're kind of melding together. That
Hmm.
this is a dimensional issue, and
Yeah.
ghost cryptids and UFOs are all dimensional. In about 30 seconds there, can you give me your thoughts
Yeah,
on
you
that?
had a fantastic on one of your shows years ago, you had a fantastic guest, and he was a scientist from California. And I
Mhm.
vividly remember him saying he believes that seeing Bigfoot is looking into the past and seeing UFOs is looking into the future. And it's, parallel universes that are doing this from time to time.
There's
I
that dimension thing, keeps cropping up.
That
But
gives
with
me
that, we
goosebumps. Yeah,
it does. And once again, solidifies the belief that we just don't know yet. There's still
yeah.
so many questions. And we're going to try and answer a few more right after this break, folks. So stay with us on Paranormal Stakeout. Be right. And we are back on Paranormal Stakeout. My guest tonight, Sherry Cox. And I want to make a couple of quick announcements here. If you want to find out more about the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation and Indian River Hauntings, check us out at paranormalfbi.com or indianriverhauntings.com. You can also see some of our investigations on YouTube, and the address there is at Indian River Hauntings 2341. You can get a hold of me at ghostguy at paranormalstakeout.org and would love to hear from you some of your questions, thoughts, or comments about the show that I can like to bring up at the beginning of the shows. If you want to see some of my other shows, past shows, you can go to paranormalstakeout.org and check them out. And I would be remiss if I did not suggest and encourage you to check out the X Zone Radio and TV network at xzoneradioandtv.com or xzbn.net to see all of the terrific programming here on the network. Now, Sherry, we're going to talk a little bit about doodlebug dowsing and dowsing rods. Tell us a little bit about your company and how folks can find you.
Okay. My partner Nikki and I are the owners of Doodlebug Dowsing. We have been in business, I think we're looking at 4 years already. And we fabricate and sell dowsing rods. And for those who may not know what dowsing rods are, they probably do and they don't know it.
Yeah,
A lot
exactly.
of people, if you talk to them in the manner of saying, if you think back to grandparents or great grandparents who may have had land, and at the time there was not the technology that we have now, and they would use a forked stick, often willow, and they would walk the land, and as they passed over underground water, that stick would snap to attention to indicate
Mhm.
underground water flow. And so that was kind of an example of dowsing. It's hundreds, if not thousands of years old. And so over time, there have been a lot of different types of businesses and that have used that. From, there are current well drilling companies that will still use them. There are people that are, linemen that deal with underground electricity. There's energy healers. We use them in the paranormal field. The ones that we create and provide are actually L rods. I have some right here. So basically, it's 2 rods made out of brass, and they have little safety tips on them. And you'll see that there are actually, there's a handle that causes the brass to be able to spin freely. So they are less influenced by your hands. So we've been doing this about 4 years now. We have a website. It's doodlebugdowsing.com. You can buy from us directly. We also have some great little bags that accompany them that we call doodle bags. And all right, we do go to paranormal events from time to time and have a table there. We often will have them at the Indian River hauntings events for sale. Larry will often use them with his guests on tours if people would like to experience them directly or with the different events that we do. We also provide them in bulk for a number of customers that we have that are paranormal tour companies. We have, groups up in Gettysburg and in Key West and, in Illinois that do purchase from us and then resell to their guests. So that's always a possibility. If someone has a store that would like to carry these types of things, we can provide them in bulk as well. So we're very lucky.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, on some of our tours, I've had a number of times people that were professional well diggers say that they still use the dowsing rods.
Yeah.
I even had an electrician one time tell me he uses them to find wires and walls. So obviously they still work. Now, one question I want to ask you before we get into how they work or what your beliefs are on how they work. Does material matter? Do you have to have a specific material for it to
A
work?
lot of people believe that they should be copper. That seems to be the general opinion, that if they're not copper, they don't work. I think, in my opinion, that's been disproven. I think it can be because of what we believe is happening when we douse. I'm not certain that it matters because I think we have shown that it doesn't. It came going back hundreds of years, they were using wooden sticks. You can use coat hangers. A lot of people will fabricate their own rods just by bending a set of coat hangers. Ours are brass and certainly have proven to work. And they don't work because they're our dowsing rods. They're proof, they work because of the work being done by the holder of the dowsing rods.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't believe it needs to be something specific.
So let's talk about how they work. Okay, I'm holding them in my hands. I can manipulate those to make them say whatever I want to say.
Yeah, you totally can.
Okay. How do we use them? How do you use them?
Yeah. The way I've had some interesting conversations with people who use dowsing rods frequently, most of them in the paranormal community. And I'll always say, I'll watch them use them. It's a very personal thing about how you go about it and kind of where you go energetically when you use them. And I'll watch them and I'll say, tell me what you think is happening when you use these rods. And I've had people say, I believe that energy or the spirit or whatever it is that they're communing with is physically moving the rods. It's like, okay, it's a good opinion. My opinion is it taps back into the energy that we were talking about earlier. If you go back hundreds of years to using the forked stick for underground water underground has frequency, and it has
Vibration.
Yep, all of those things. And we, as energetic vessels, have the ability to tap into this. So these simply become a tool for expressing that energy that we are sensing, the frequency and all of that. So for it being a tool for communication, you think, or healing, that type of thing, you think about it the same way you think about a pendulum.
Okay.
And does that make sense?
Yeah, explain a bit further for.
Okay. So the idea of someone using a pendulum is there's something that's called the ideomotor effect. And that's something about the human body where there are small, little, imperceptible movements that happen to us all the time that we're unaware of. If you're standing still, you're not standing still.
Right.
And it's these little idiomotor effects that are actually what we believe are moving the rods. We actually count on them to move the rods or the pendulum. So somebody said, well, you're moving those. Well, yes, we are, but not on purpose. So we are kind of attuning ourselves energetically into whatever it is that we're trying to douse, whether that's hidden treasure or information, questions, or a spirit or another energy that we're trying to talk to, or someone is using it to diagnose a blockage in chakras when you use it in energy healing, or we're trying to determine if there are underground burials, that type of thing. Or you go back to one of our investigations, and I was walking the land out in the back of one of our investigation locations, and I would walk and I would get these hits, and I didn't know why I was getting them. And then finally I went to our host and I said, do you have a backyard sprinkler system? And he's like, yep. And I'm like, well, I could show you exactly where the heads are. You couldn't see them, but you can even do that. So you're tapping into the frequency and the energy of underground water. So really, that's what that's about.
Do people unintentionally manipulate them to get what they want?
I think they can, absolutely, just like anything else.
How do we avoid that?
I think it's ethics.
Okay.
I don't know that we avoid it. I mean, I think people are always going to do things like that. And how do we now, if you say, how do we avoid that in the case of, we have somebody with us, I think there's a lot of trust. There's a lot of education. There's a lot of
That's the word I'm
experiencing
looking for. Yeah.
experiencing that person
And
more
education,
than
teaching.
once. Teaching, yeah.
Mhm.
But I think you're always going to have people who are doing things that they shouldn't.
And that's where education ethics comes into play, and it goes
Yeah.
back to what we talked about earlier is bringing people into the fold and teaching them, and I'm gonna use your term, the right way, but the right
Mhm.
way simply is nothing more than being the honest way and doing the best you
Yeah.
can and learning about it. Now, during an investigation, absolute proof positive when those rods move, there's a spirit there, right?
No, I don't think
Oh,
so.
okay. Okay.
No. No, I think dowsing rods are important because they're subjective. They can't
Mhm.
record, we can't go back, we can record video of someone doing a dowsing rod session. We can do that type of thing so we can preserve that evidence, but because it's kind of like the idea of being a medium. It's like
Mhm.
you get that information and you can write that information down or record it, but we can never control what that person is doing. So I think dowsing rods are really important to be used in conjunction with other pieces of equipment, because there are times where you get 100% corroboration over something. And
And
that
that's
makes it a
happened,
little
has
more interesting. So I think it just adds dowsing rods or pendulums or that type of thing, just adds another level to what you're doing in terms of investigation. I don't think it's ever for certain.
and a lot of people, that's one thing we try to teach people is that it by itself is not
Mm-mm.
proof positive of the other side. Now, I recall one investigation where we actually had the rods move, and we have cameras on all the time. Whenever we use them, we
Yeah.
are filming. And actually, I remember this one time the rods moved, and basically said that they were moving them themselves. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, that whatever was there said they were moving themselves, which I found very interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
But
but we don't know for sure.
does that mean physically or does that mean energetically? And I don't know that we got an answer to that.
No, I don't know that we did either, and I don't
Yeah.
know that at this point we ever will. Probably the most significant, and I'll just mention it here, was an event where we were using the rods. We had a medium with us, Chris. We had the spirit box going, and all these things told us the same thing about a little
Mhm.
girl that passed away there, and you'll remember where that is. And folks, just to take that a step further, not only were we told about a little girl there, we actually found her grave that was unmarked in a cemetery. So how does this stuff happen? I don't
Mhm.
know, but it was a pretty significant event. We're still working on that one. Um, how important? What's the most important piece of equipment? I know you're a dowsing rod person. What do you think is the most significant piece of equipment we have out there today?
Our brains.
Okay. Go on.
Us. I think we're the
Expound.
most and that goes back to, do we spend more time developing ourselves, developing our senses, that type of thing? And maybe my answer does. I think, none of the bells and whistles or the things that take batteries or light up or make sounds, none of that matters without this. And I think too, you could also argue without this and a sense of responsibility and a sense of, we keep talking about ethics and doing things for the right reason in the right way. And I think none of it matters if this is not in alignment.
Well said, and I totally agree. And
Yeah.
that's where it all comes together. None of this stuff counts without proper training, proper structure, proper ethics, and just helping people understand to do the right thing and not harm others by
Yeah.
our
Now, I'm not going to lie. I love a good run pod.
not gonna lie
Yeah.
about
I'm
that.
not going to
Always
lie.
excited. There's a just like everybody wants a little bit of excitement. But Sherry, unfortunately, we are out of time. This went so fast, but I really, really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing with us your thoughts, your philosophies. Thank you so much for being with us. And folks, thank you for being with us tonight on Paranormal Stakeout. Great show. Thanks for being here. Remember, take care of your family, hug those kids, and we'll see you on the other side. Have a good night, folks.